Someone Like You by Sparkypasker. Read by Distracted by Books. Chapter 27. Izuku sat on the train in his full gear. It may have been the middle of the day, but because of the sports festival going on, the compartment he was in was nearly deserted. Which was all right with him. He likes his personal space. It also allowed him to watch the festival himself without unwanted commentary. If he was going to watch it at all, it needed to be live. Yes, it was recorded so that it can be rewatched later, but a lot of things are cut out. They only keep what's exciting. Izuku grinned underneath his mask. Not only that, but if he waited until the recording became available, then he wouldn't be able to hear any commentary from Eraserhead. They tended to do that. No one really listened to the commentators during the live performance, but they do during recordings. So more than likely they would crop out his voice and just keep present mics. And he just couldn't have that. Eraserhead may not be fighting, or even showing his face for that matter, but Izuku always tended to be a perfectionist if he was given the chance. He was going to collect everything he came across that was even remotely related to Eraserhead. He was even tempted to hack into the police's database again and take a peek at what cases he was working on. But he had thought about it some more and decided it was better left untouched. He didn't want any of Eraserhead's cases to get tossed because someone quirkless had touched it. Even if Izuku wanted to take on more cases, it probably wouldn't be a good idea anyway. He was getting enough information from his network that he could damn near predict the crime before it happened. And he was actually learning quite a lot about villains in the meantime. Like the fact that most villains are not these evil beings they depict them to be on television. Some people are just running with the wrong crowd and committing crimes in order to fit in. Others are doing it in order to survive, and even others yet are committing petty crimes because they're bored and think it's fun. And even if it was the case, that doesn't mean they're evil. Izuku had made connections with local community involvement programs and pointed those types of people in their direction. After all, it's better if they can burn off their excess energy doing something for the community rather than bothering others. Community involvement programs aren't the only connections he had made recently. Izuku had also found a couple of homeless shelters that received some funding for continuing education and rental assistance, as well as a food pantry and kitchen that made free meals for the public a couple times a week. When Izuku met them, they had mentioned how they wanted to help more people, but didn't have the resources to expand their services or to even get their names out to the people who needed them the most. From then on, Izuku had decided he would screen the criminals he came across. If there was someone who could be helped without involving the legal system, then that was what he was going to do. There was no need to involve the police and waste taxpayer money on something that could be solved as easily as introducing the right people to the right resources, especially since involving the police could result in the person he wants to help to instead have a mark on their record that could disqualify them from resources in the future. Of course, this didn't work for everyone. There were people out there who were genuinely evil. More often than not, they were the ones committing violent crimes. Now, don't get him wrong. There were people who were in desperate situations that will commit crimes in a violent manner, like mugging someone with a knife. But that isn't exactly what he considers a violent crime, because at the end of the day, the person with the knife just wants money, not to hurt anyone. When he thinks of violent crimes, he thinks of murder or someone forcing themselves on another. Those types of people were unforgivable. The only way they would be able to atone for their crimes would be to serve a prison sentence. Speaking of violent crimes, that's where Izuku was headed. He had heard through his grapevine that there was a villain targeting heroes. According to his sources, the villain has killed over a dozen heroes and maimed twice that amount. It seemed like the police were trying to keep the murders under wraps until the villain was caught. If it became public knowledge that a villain could take out that many heroes, it could cause chaos. It would shake the foundations of society's justice system. The last time he checked in, the hero killer, wow, so original, was in Hosu. So that was where Izuku was headed. He knew that there were already heroes on the case, but they were getting absolutely nowhere. They knew his quirk caused people to become paralyzed, but they didn't know how it was activated or what its weaknesses were. It seemed the heroes that were targeted and survived didn't pay any closer attention than that. Izuku was certain the heroes would not be happy about his involvement, but the police precinct he normally dealt with should hopefully vouch for him. He had been getting clean arrests for weeks now, and even the sergeant had a small amount of respect for him. Or at least, he didn't make thinly veiled insults anymore. And if they didn't vouch for him, well, people tend to look unfavorably on villains that target heroes. They would probably take his information, even if it was compromised, if it resulted in the arrest of the hero killer. The whole the end justifies the means type of thing. Oh, look! There's Uraraka! She had been doing great at hiding her quirk throughout the majority of the sports festival. It helped that there wasn't really any way that she could use it to her advantage other than to make herself lighter. Even though she had been training at the cafe, she hadn't been doing so long enough to make her immune to her quirk's nauseating effects, so she tended not to do that. The third event of the festival is a one-on-one tournament. Let's see who Uraraka is supposed to be fighting. Oh boy. That's not good. Izuku wasn't sure how this was going to go. There was no way Uraraka was going to be able to fight Bakugo without a quirk. Ochako paced back and forth in her waiting room. Her fight with Bakugo was next, and she didn't know what she was going to do. She had been careful the whole festival and not shown her quirk in any obvious way. But now, she was going to be fighting against one of the strongest members of her class. Well, everyone in her class was strong, but when you think about explosions, you think about how powerful they are and all the damage they can do. Yeah, she wasn't going to be able to fight quirkless. And based on what she had observed, Bakugo would probably be furious if she didn't give this fight her all. She took a deep breath to ground herself and opened her door. She had a fight to win. Izuku watched the fight as he walked out of the train station. He knew that was rude, but once again, he was the only person around, so it's not like he would run into someone due to not looking where he was going. He watched as Bakugo set off explosion after explosion and chased Uraraka around the ring. He could see the determination in her eyes as she dodged blasts again and again. He could remember the heat as the explosions were set off just above his skin, always just enough to burn and cause pain, but never enough to cause permanent damage. Even if it was at his own expense, Izuku was always impressed by the amount of control Bakugo had over his quirk. It was something that was rarely seen in anyone, let alone a child. Izuku watched as she nearly danced around Bakugo and led him to create more and more damage to the ring. Even as it filled with smoke, Izuku could see that there was far less rubble than there should have been. The crowd began to boo, and Izuku frowned. Even after hundreds of years since quirks came about, women were still seen as physically and emotionally weak. Throughout their school years, they were still pushed into finding employment as secretaries or to become homemakers. Those who had enough support to allow them to pursue more physical careers were few and far between. The fact that nearly a third of this year's freshman class is female is, frankly, a miracle. Izuku can only hope this leads to a positive change in the dynamics of the heroics industry. But truthfully, it probably won't. This will more than likely be seen as a one-off. Real change won't happen until more resources are available for those who want to become heroes, regardless of their quirk or gender. But Uraraka showed them. Izuku smiled widely beneath his mask. She showed all those out there who doubted her. The camera panned to the space above the stage. Tons of rubble was floating above the fighters. Izuku saw Uraraka smirk as she touched her fingertips together, bringing the rock raining down on her opponent. Maybe he should get the recording when it comes out. That would make for a great action shot to play over for Uraraka. A large explosion turned the camera feed white and shorted out the microphone. When the video and audio feed was working again, it showed Uraraka on the ground, trying to stand, and Bakugo hunched over with his hand gripping his wrist tightly. As far as Izuku was aware, that was the largest explosion he had made. It probably damaged his tendons enough that he would have to either get healed or forfeit the next match. And Izuku knew it was going to be Bakugo moving on. If Izuku knew anything about Uraraka, it was that if she could stand now, she would already be up. If Izuku knew Bakugo half as well as he thought he did, there was no way he was going to forfeit. He would be moving on. Izuku took to the roofs. He was bummed that none of his friends made it to the finals, but they definitely showed what they could do. He put his phone away. He had set his phone to record the remainder and to automatically send it to his encrypted hard drive. Unfortunately, he couldn't go jumping from building to building and watch the broadcast at the same time. He had a villain to find. Now, he didn't plan on actually fighting the villain. No matter if he has been successfully fighting and arresting villains for weeks, the ones he caught were in no way skilled enough to successfully kill one pro hero, let alone 17. No, what he was planning on doing was information gathering. And if a hero was being attacked when Izuku was watching, well, he would figure it out when or if he crossed that bridge. A yelp echoed from the alley on the other side of the building he was standing on. Izuku quickly and quietly rushed to the edge. Izuku didn't know whether to praise or dread his luck, because there, in the alley, was the hero killer and a hero pinned through the leg with a katana. Izuku watched as the hero killer grabbed the katana out of the hero's leg and dragged his tongue across the blood. He watched as the hero killer's throat bobbed and the hero tensed. The hero's eyes frantically moved around, but he couldn't seem to move anything else. You have been judged and found to embody nothing of what it means to be a hero. A gravelly voice echoed through the alley. Therefore, you have been sentenced to death. Rejoice, for your death will bring about a greater breed of hero. The hero killer raised his sword high above his head. The roar of an engine was heard. Sparks flew through the air as the hero killer's blade bounced off the leg of a hero clad in armor. The villain jumped away from the fallen hero. Stain! Put down your weapons and surrender. You are under arrest for the murders of 17 heroes and multiple counts of assault. Come quietly, or I will have to use force. Izuku recognized that hero. It was Ingenium. A good chunk of the funding for the food pantries, soup kitchens, and community involvement programs come from his family's agency. Even though Ingenium doesn't know that Izuku even exists, Izuku still considers him an important partner in giving people the resources they need to be successful in life. I won't stop. This world needs to be cleansed of fake heroes. Anyone who can't see that is simply perpetuating the current system and is therefore a fake themselves. The hero killer, or Stain, as Izuku had just found, rushed at Ingenium. The hero used the armor on his arms to block the blade. The two danced around each other, all while the injured hero lay dying on the ground. It wouldn't be too much longer before the hero bled out. Ingenium seemed to feel the time limit that had been placed on him and attempted to increase the tempo of the fight to throw Stain off. Instead, this led to Stain slipping past him and burying a blade into the space between the top and bottom of his armor. Ingenium cried out and fell to the ground. Stain licked the blood off the knife and Ingenium froze. Izuku's heart raced. He wasn't sure what he was supposed to do. He couldn't fight Stain. But maybe he wouldn't need to. Izuku quickly took his phone out of his pocket. Ingenium, you have been judged and found to be lacking. Your sentence is death. May your passing bring about a higher standard of hero. Izuku quickly relayed information of 2 heroes injured while Stain monologued, then put his phone back into his pocket while he was still connected to dispatch. Every call is recorded, so hopefully they can use the information in the call to catch him. Because there was no mistake about it. Stain was going to escape. There was no way Izuku was going to be able to detain him. An ambulance and the police were en route. Izuku's heart raced in his chest as he stood. He had never been this nervous going into a villain fight, but, truth be told, he had never been this close to dying before. Izuku jumped from the roof. Stain sensed his presence from above and swung his sword toward where Izuku was descending on him. The soles of Izuku's shoes came into contact with the blade. The plate of steel built into the shoe stopped him from getting injured by the blade, and the pressure of the sword against his feet gave him enough leverage to flip himself backwards and land on his feet. Unfortunately, Stain was standing between Izuku and the heroes. Stain looked at Izuku and relaxed slightly, but did not lower his weapon. You're not a hero. That's correct, Izuku said. Get out of here, kid. This is no place to play vigilante. Legally, I'm not a kid. Also, legally, I'm not a vigilante either. I'm a crime fighter. And I'm sorry to say, I can't just leave and let you kill them. A crime fighter? Ah, I see. You're quirkless. Look, I'm not going to kill you. Go find someone else. I didn't become a crime fighter to die. I'm doing it so I can help people, so that I can save people. Stain looked at him. Then you are a true hero. Not a hero, Izuku mumbled. Be that as it may, you are still a true hero. Then you must realize these 2 cannot be allowed to live. This one, Stain pointed to the first fallen hero with the tip of his katana, is a pedophile. He uses the trust children give him to prey on their innocence. And this one, he switched to pointing at Ingenium, is defending that villain, posing as a hero. Of course he is, Izuku insisted. That is what makes him a true hero. A true hero would never allow a villain like him to roam the streets. Stain yelled. You're right, they wouldn't. But they would also not allow someone to be killed right in front of their eyes. They would do anything, even risk their own life, to save them. A true hero saves not only the innocent, but also those who have gone astray. Stain looked at him. There is some merit to what you say. But if that is the case, how could I guarantee that Ingenium wouldn't just allow him to go back to work, back to ruining the lives of countless children who look up to him? You can't. You would have to trust that he would do the right thing once the truth came to light. I can't trust them. I can't allow even the possibility of them going back to their villainous activities that stain the names of heroes. There has to be something else you can do. You don't have to kill them. But I must. You are just a child. You don't understand that sometimes some things just have to be done, no matter how much you don't like it. I don't like having to kill, but if I must, then I will stain my hands with the blood of those who are undeserving and only leave behind those that are. Izuku was getting desperate. Stain had been slowly moving backwards towards the fallen heroes during their discussion. He was going to kill them sooner rather than later. He had to do something, But what could he do? He had seen his moves firsthand. He was nowhere near skilled enough to fight him and come out alive. But he couldn't just let them die. Then I'll do it! Izuku screamed. Stain paused. You. I'll find the heroes that have used their positions to commit crimes, and I will bring them to light. Then we will let the public and the justice system punish those who are deserving of it. Stain's next statement was interrupted by the sound of sirens coming from the street. Oh, you're a smart one. Stain grinned widely, all his teeth on display. You distracted me from my mission long enough for reinforcements to arrive. But no matter. I will leave for today. Stain swiped his used knives along the countless bandages wrapped around his body to clean them, then put them back in their sheaths. He rushed at Izuku and wrapped one hand around the front of his throat. But remember, Stain hissed into Izuku's ear, you made a promise. If it is not kept, the next one I come after will be you. He released Izuku and jumped into the air. He jumped from building to building until he was on the roof. Then he was gone. Izuku felt boneless and nearly fell over in relief, but he couldn't do that quite yet. He had to stop the bleeding. He ran over to the first fallen hero. He was one Izuku didn't immediately recognize. He might have been too local, too new to the area, or even someone who was only a hero part-time. Either way, it didn't matter. He was going to bleed out before the ambulance arrived if Izuku didn't do something about it. Izuku sat next to the hero and ripped some of the fabric off his poorly made costume. He then tied it around the uppermost part of the thigh to act as a tourniquet. That was pretty much the only thing he could do. The hero was unconscious from blood loss, so he couldn't even determine how much other damage had occurred. He then went to Ingenium, who was still laying on his stomach. Izuku took a look at the injury, but it didn't seem like any major blood vessels were hit, and the cut was too close to his spine for Izuku to feel comfortable doing anything else. You're one crazy kid, you know that? Ingenium said, his voice echoing inside his helmet. Well, I had to distract him somehow. Making him talk about his ideals seemed like a good way to do that. Do you have any other injuries I may have missed, or is it just your back? I still can't move, so I'm not really sure. Okay, once you can move again, make sure to stay as still as possible. Spinal cord injuries can be exacerbated by movement. We need to make sure only the medical professionals move you. I can do that. Good. So, what's your name, kid? Ingenium's breathing was quickening slightly. He was probably trying to fight off panic. Izuku could only imagine how it would feel to not know whether he would ever be able to walk again. Absent. Because of the quirkless thing? Yeah, basically. Izuku didn't really want to get into all of the nuances of his name choice. Well, even if Stain is crazy, he was right about one thing. You really are a true hero. Can't be a hero without a quirk. Technically, there is nothing to say that, but I'm not going to fight you about it. It doesn't really matter either way. You're my hero. Izuku blushed under his mask. The ambulances pulled up to the alley, and the paramedics rushed 2 gurneys out of the back. Izuku briefly informed the medical personnel about the extent of the injuries that he was able to gather and what first aid he had done. A police officer then came to take his statement. They weren't too impressed when Izuku showed them his license. They looked at him in disgust, as if they were repulsed by even breathing the same air as him. He could tell they wanted to just shred his license to pieces. But Izuku was right about one thing. They were more concerned about getting information on the hero killer than they were about his being quirkless. Once the police and the ambulances had left, Izuku was left alone in the alley alongside 2 puddles of blood. He leaned against a wall, then slid to the ground. His phone dug into his side from where it was sitting in his pocket. He took it out to relieve the pressure, only to see that the call was still going. Izuku's breath was paralyzed in his lungs, and he may as well have been stuck in Stain's quirk for as little as he dared to move. He had just been recorded telling Stain that he was going to help him bring down society as they know it. Damn. End of chapter. Chapter 28. Katsuki sat at his desk looking over his internship choices. The first thing he had done when he got it was cross off anyone who wasn't in the top 20. There was no way someone lower than that would be able to teach him anything. Most of the papers were crossed out entirely. One by one, the papers were thrown into the air and landed wherever they landed. Katsuki really didn't care either way. He imagined his classmates were probably looking at him in annoyance or disgust for that glasses-faced extra. But frankly, he didn't really care. None of them would be able to measure up to him. He would be the number one hero, and they would be nothing more than the dirt beneath his feet. Hey, dude. Katsuki looked to his left to see a bright red head of hair holding a small pile of papers he had picked up off the floor. What shitty hair, he said. Well, he supposed not all his classmates were extras. This one, at least, was able to stand at his side without complaint about how they were getting burned. They were an effective team during exercises. Katsuki was able to go all out without having to worry about getting deducted points for hurting his partner. That being said, his hair really was shitty. You could tell the color was from a box because of how bright it was. Even when people had hair that was naturally red, it was more subdued, not the color of a fire engine. Even if you choose not to go to these internships, it would probably be good to keep the aisles clear. We don't want someone slipping on these papers. They could get hurt. If one of these extras slips on a piece of paper, they deserve to get hurt. That's not cool, dude. We need to be respectful of our classmates. We're all going to be heroes after all. That word, respectful, pierced through Katsuki's head. Does he need to be respectful? Do heroes? Heroes just beat up villains. That's not very respectful. What part of being a hero means we have to be respectful? Dude, that's like the entire thing with being a hero. What are you talking about? Katsuki asked in genuine confusion. Heroes are the ones that inspire their communities. They're the ones that people look up to when they want to know how to act. Would you want some kid acting like how you are acting now? Katsuki didn't really care about how kids acted. It wasn't up to him to teach them how to act. That was their parents' job. Why did he have to care? He remembered all the videos of heroes he had watched growing up. How they all defeated the villain and won the day. They never spouted any crap about respect. Hell, some of them didn't even give the media the time of day. But then he remembers the videos of All Might, about how All Might would always stay to make sure the victims were okay, how he would always give the media a little snippet after each takedown, how he made sure to never harm the villain more than necessary because everyone knew All Might could kill the villains easily, and All Might was the number one hero. It made sense that he would do things the right way, the best way. Fine, Katsuki said, taking the stack of papers from his classmate. Shitty Hair grinned at him proudly. Katsuki felt his face light up in embarrassment, a small tinge of anger, and something else he couldn't quite identify. He piled the papers in a corner of his desk and continued to look through his list. But Shitty Hair's words kept running through his head. He had questions, and there was only one person he could think of that could give him the answers. Katsuki stood from his desk and walked to the front of the room where Aizawa-sensei was laying in his ugly-ass sleeping bag. Aizawa-sensei opened his eyes as Katsuki approached. Do you have your internship picked out? He asked. Yes, sensei. Aizawa-sensei stood from his bag and went to his podium where he had a computer set up. He had decided many years ago to simply do the paperwork for internships as soon as the students had chosen. It was the only way he was able to not get overwhelmed and be able to patrol without worrying about paperwork. Okay, give me your form. Katsuki handed his internship form to Aizawa-sensei. He looked it over and started filling in the spaces in the computer. When he got to the section about where Katsuki had decided to go, he paused. I didn't think he sent you a request. He didn't. It's extremely unusual for heroes to accept an internship from a student they didn't request in the first place, especially when they are not on our list of agencies that will accept any of our students. I figured, but I think he's the only one who can help me right now. Aizawa looked at Katsuki, as if trying to read between the lines. He knew the most about Katsuki, but even he didn't know the full extent of everything that had happened and was currently happening in his life. Aizawa-sensei nodded. Okay, I will send the form in, but make sure to have a backup. Katsuki nodded and handed Aizawa-sensei another form, this one filled out with the information from a hero that had actually requested him. Best genist. He knew it was a long shot, but he had to take it. Katsuki had questions, and there was only one person who would be able to answer them. Sir Night-Eye. End of chapter.